So yes, lovely to be with you today. I'm going to be introducing my friend and colleague Denis Bourne a little bit later on, and he and I are really looking forward to sharing with you today some of the insights that we've gained by being able to look at organisations as informal networks and understanding the patterns of those networks and ultimately helping organisations fix for themselves. That's critically important. We'll be talking a lot about that through the conversation. Fix for themselves some of the wicked problems that the conventional approaches don't seem to be able to get to. So I very much like the SCiO purpose, which talks about, you know, conventional thinking being responsible for many of the problems, X, Y, Z. Yes, that's absolutely where we're coming from with this. So I don't have very much time today. We're just going to share with you some examples of the visual data that we're able to create and use a little case study to hopefully bring that to life. The only thing I'll say before I move on is Denis and I don't much like presentations, but we do love conversations. So please do unmute, chip in, raise your hand to the camera, raise your hand digitally, do whatever you need to do to get our attention. We'd love to hear from you right the way through the chat this evening. Please don't save it all to the end. If you're thinking it, then it's likely that whatever it is you have to say or whatever question you have to ask, it's going to be useful to many, many more people on the call as well. So that's good. Any questions, or can I push on? Give us a thumbs up if you're happy. I've got a huge thumbs up from Patrick there, so that's good enough for me. So first of all, perhaps just a little bit of audience participation. I'd like you just to take a minute, find a scrap of paper, and draw a picture of an organisation you know well. Draw a picture of it. You only have a minute. Draw a picture of an organisation you know well, and then if you're feeling brave enough, switch your camera on and flash it up, and we'll have a look, see what we end up with. Oh, I can hear a Sharpie going. That's a good sign. Okay. Is anybody not ready to show what they have? Anybody not ready? Right, I'll take that. Come on then, let's go for the big reveal. What have we got? Just hold something up. I've got a boat. I've got overlapping circles. I like that. I've got something that looks very complicated. I've got an organogram for Monique. Thank you, Monique. We always need one of those. Is that a boat or a sinking ship? Rebecca. Tank. Oh, it's a tank.
Tank.
Oh, right. Yeah. As in large,
about my drawing.
as in large immovable object. Yeah. Anything else? Nikki, what have you got? We can't quite make it out.
It's an organisation split into two halves because everything that happens at the corporate centre is wonderful. All the exec are at the corporate centre, all the photographs of anyone doing anything important at the corporate centre. Guess where I'm situated? Not at the corporate centre. I'm in a little backwater office of, 1,000 people or so, but we don't matter.
Wonderful. I think we could expand this session to be sort of part therapy, part useful, part peer support, probably for the next hour. Excellent, really good. So by the way, I do this. I'm invited to teach occasionally on an MBA program, and I always ask the students that question. And sadly, I'm ashamed to admit that you never ever get anything other than the box and line organogram. They're not able to think outside that particular box. I don't know when Patrick, I was fully expecting to see lots of VSMs, do it with the Deming lot, and you get lots of figure ones. Yeah, Patrick, of course, we knew we could rely on you for that. Do it with the Deming gang, and you get the figure one from Out of the Crisis. The reality is, of course, that for most people who are, dare I say, less enlightened than perhaps we are, you end up here. And that is and has been since the famous railway collision that Peter Scholtes wrote about in his book, has been kind of the default way that the only way really that we have to visually describe organizations. If you think about it, we have lots and lots of ways of describing a business, but actually very few practical and useful ways of describing an organization. And I'm sure I won't be alone amongst this group of people by, you can't help but notice what sort of assumptions that reinforces. It's all focused on your job is to look good in front of the person that sits above you and not deliver great work to the customer who doesn't even feature on the chart. So that's what we're left with. We don't think it's nearly good enough. Oh, sorry. I can move the chat out of the way of my advanced button. There we go, that's better. So not at all useful in understanding how knowledge gets created or renewed in the organization. There's a complete absence of the customer, all the suppliers for that matter, or the new and exciting market to capture in the future. And no idea where the really valuable relationships within and beyond the organization reside. So yeah, bottom line is we need to do a whole lot better. And we believe that we can and we should. Let's just have a look at that slide in front of you. I'm getting a nod of head from Monique. She's perhaps seen it before.
That's what my drawing was supposed to represent, but there's too many people to list.
Yeah, so this one usually raises a smile. And I think the reason why it raises a smile is it really resonates. We've all been in organizations where those sorts of relationships are sadly the ones that drive all sorts of different behaviors, and they largely fall into the unhelpful category. But I don't share it just for amusement. It does have a purpose here in so much as there is this whole other set of stuff, relationships which form fluid and ever-changing networks within organizations. But these networks are the ones that get the work done. These are the ones that solve the wicked problems. These are the ones that come up with the great ideas. These are the ones that enable people to have a channel for their great ideas and collaboration. Dennis has just noted the joke in chat about number 10. You'll notice a slight satellite delay between Dennis joins us from France today. So I clocked that. I thought, yeah, Dennis will find that one amusing. Face lights up. Yeah, so we know there is this reality which which sadly the org chart kind of fails to depict. The org chart is, after all, just an artifact. It bears very little relation to the reality of the organisation itself. So it is through collaborative work networks that work gets done, value gets created, innovation happens, all that good stuff. And instinctively we know that, but for most people, they are quite able to go through their entire working lives without actually having visibility of that as kind of a system, as a big picture in which they can recognize the patterns and the things that are going on outside their own individual network. So that's really what we want to lift the lid on today, really. And this is what a map of knowledge flow looks like in an organization. My objective here, or our objective here, is just to give you an appreciation of having sight of what these networks can do in terms of an organization's ability to solve its own problems. The charts happen to be generated by our own software, and the data that sits behind them comes from very detailed online data collection from everybody in the population. All the slides we're going to show with you this afternoon are from the same organisation, happens to be a manufacturing organisation in South Africa. But before we get into that, it's important that we all have a good and common understanding of what's being represented here. So does anybody want to offer a thought what might be depicted by the small circles just with 2 or 3 initials in? What do you think those might be representing? Just unmute and shout them out.
People.
People. Patrick, anyone might have thought you've seen something like this before. Yeah, people, absolutely. Innocent shrug of the shoulders. Very good, sir. Yes, absolutely right. So those are individuals, and the big circles of circles, all commonly coloured. Someone other than Patrick, what do you think those might be depicting? The answer's on the screen, by the way, so it's, I'm not going to give away a huge prize.
Departments, functions.
Absolutely right. Yeah. And the lines between them.
Personal connections.
Yeah. So in this case, what we're looking at is what we term an agreed link. So both ends of the connection confirm the same thing to be true. And in this instance, both people are saying that it is at least very important to both of them that they give and get information about new technology. And Denis will very, very shortly just be unpacking perhaps some of the insights that we get from that slide. But just before I hand over to Denis, there is just a very, very important principle which we apply here. So you'll notice the 2.5 people on the screen who've just appeared. Clive Woodward, Johnny Wilkinson, Martin Johnson, the poster boys, I guess, of the Rugby World Cup winning side in 2003. Clive Woodward had an interesting career in rugby, and then an interesting career in business, and then an interesting career as a rugby coach, and now an interesting career in business second time around. And Clive did lots and lots of new things, new and experimental things, when he was tasked with the job of building a team that could win the World Cup. One of the things that he did, he was the first rugby union side to do it, was to invest in really quite sophisticated analysis capability. So each of the guys runs around the pitch with a little RF frequency, so some sort of transponder in the back of their shirt. They get all of this visual data about where they are on the pitch, what their heart rate's doing, all the rest of that. And in every other sport that had ever been used before, that information all went to the coaches, and then they interpreted it, and then they told the players what to do. And this didn't go down particularly well with Sir Clive. And he said, no, we as the coaching team get missed out of that loop. We give the guys really good visual data. We give them the power to interrogate the system so they can get the data that they think will be most interesting out, and we leave it to them to interpret that data for themselves. And we leave it to them to then discuss with the coaches what they might do as a result of it. And that is absolutely the way that we work with this data. We never, ever, ever, ever offer any analysis, any solution. All we do is we create a safe space for conversation. We work with representatives from the client organizations and sift through, you know, this thing could produce 100,000 charts at a drop of a hat. Produce a handful, so maybe up to 100 really, really good charts that we use through a series of workshops. And just in small groups, small bunch of charts, people self-select into groups, go and find their own meaning. And that for us is really, really important. We are not best placed to understand what sits behind the patterns, but by providing that data to them, we find that the clients are the best people to make their own sense of this situation. So I'm just going to pause there. Any questions on what I've shared today, or can I now hand over to Denis? Give us a thumbs up if you're happy. Yeah, lots of thumbs up. Great. Okay. Denis, welcome. I see the sun's still shining brightly in the south of France. That's always good to know. Over to you.
Good. Thank you. Thank you, and good evening, everyone. The next slide then, which is actually the same as the last one without the picture. Can I just use this one to draw your attention to a few features of these charts? The first thing is, if you look carefully, you'll see the lines have an arrow at one end or the other, or sometimes both. And this is simply because when we give a question, when we use a question which is about giving and getting information, then it can either be a one-way link or a two-way link. And the arrows indicate that. So if the arrows are there at both ends of the link, then it is two-way agreed. Next, you'll see that some of the marketing is a good example. Some of the circles have got dotted lines, and these are isolates. And they are known as isolates because they have no agreed links within whatever it is that the query that we used. It does not make them bad people, but it does raise some interesting questions. And the sheer number of isolates is also quite often interesting. And I'll show you some more later. Number two, look in the bottom left-hand corner and you find a pale blue-ish group, which is engineering, and notice how dominant they are. If you look at the interdepartmental links, which don't appear on the organogram, remember, there's a hell of a lot of them going through engineering, and they are actually connecting some of the other departments. If you look at the 12 o'clock position in the engineering group, there's a guy there whose initials are DOF. He is the head of engineering, and he was our client. He sponsored this entire thing. And you see increasingly as we go through that his role is really quite dominant. The company had its main manufacturing facility in Joburg, but it also had two satellites, number one and number two. And if you look at them, you see some interesting differences in the sense that satellite number one appears to have a better team working situation than satellite number two. So that's always worth observing as well. Marketing is an interesting one because the entire marketing department is isolated. But, and this is just reinforcing the point that Ben, mate, we haven't got a clue why. We have no idea. I could instantly think of half a dozen reasons, and we simply don't know which one of those is correct. And we gave up doing the analysis and the interpretation decades ago, because every time we tried it, we were invariably wrong. And being invariably wrong is not a good life position, so we stopped doing it. And I'll come back to the marketing thing in a moment and illustrate how we can get more under the surface. The very brief history about this particular organization, their problem, which DOF handed us, was around new product development. And you'll notice that we're not going to show you any pictures about networks relating to new product development. And that's because our front-end research said there were many other things disturbing this organization other than NPD in itself. And we took the opportunity to widen the search quite considerably. So there's your first chart. We go to the next one, please, Ben, where we simply get rid of the isolates. And therefore, inevitably, marketing has disappeared. The team working in satellite number 1 is now clearer. And because the isolates have disappeared, you see that satellite 2 has shrunk. Because when we got rid of the isolates, then some of those guys disappeared off the screen. Right, let's go to the next slide. And you'll notice that in this picture, the departmental structure has gone. It's completely disappeared. We actually have 3 different clustering algorithms. I'm only going to bore you with one of them tonight. But these are simply algorithms that produce groupings on the screen driven by the relationships and not by the structure. So this is a much better representation of how the thing actually works. And if you look at this one is a group power structure. So we've been able to drill down on a particular topic absolutely into the heart of where the action is. So you've got a small group of people dominating the whole process of dissemination of information on new technology. The chap at 9 o'clock is DOF, and we always put the chap with the highest number of links at that 9 o'clock position, whatever that person may be in the organization. More interestingly, you notice that with very few exceptions, there's only 2 colors in that group. So the topic is absolutely dominated by 2 colors. They happen to be engineering and satellite number 1, blue and red. But this now gives us a very big insight into how this particular part of the process in the organization actually functions, the inner cabinet. Please notice that some people are not within the circle, but attached to it. And these are known as attached isolates. They're attached to the group, but their influence is relatively limited. And we've also got a couple of examples, they're small ones, of attached chains. And you might find it amusing to ponder that the longest attached chain we've ever found had 15 people in it. When you think about trying to influence the group when you've got to go through a 1 step at a time chain of 15 people, you think, what's the chances of communicating effectively? Absolutely 0. So we're always interested to see where the chains are and see who is in them. Okay, we'll move on. Ben, please. Please notice this time that we are no longer talking about agreed links. We're actually talking about denied links. In other words, one person has claimed a link with another and the other has said, not on your Nelly. No, doesn't exist. If you look carefully at the charts, you'll see that some of the blobs on the ends of the line are dark grey and some are light grey. And they are light grey if they're denied links between members of different groups, and dark grey if they are disagreed links within the same group. And if you look at dear old satellite factory number 2, they've got an awful lot of denial going on inside their own group, which is the exact opposite of what we'd like to see as good team working. And please notice now there's a partial solution to the question about, sorry, Nikki Jobson's just said, what is meant by denial? Very briefly, the way this goes, I could claim a link with another person and say it's very important, and they could claim a link with me and say it's not important. And that would be a disagreed link. A denied link is where one person claims the link and the other one denies it totally. They don't acknowledge the existence of the link at all. Comfy with that? So we're back to marketing. And the issue here is that two people in marketing are denying links from engineering. So we know that there are people in engineering, at least, who think they are communicating with marketing, but marketing are denying, and we still don't know the answer to the real question. Why is that happening? Right, let's see, in pre-production, where are we? Yep, you're absolutely correct. Can I just give you a quick example about this? Because we have to be just so desperately careful. And this was a similar situation that occurred in a different company where we found one guy who denied links with everybody. And when we produced the data in a workshop session and he looked at it and he said, well, this is stupid. They all looked at him and thought, oh, you're the one doing the denying. He said, why do you want to work with me? I don't count. And this was a guy with huge talent and knowledge, with a very modest perception of himself. And he was amazed that anybody wanted to work with him. So that's a very good example of how we can see a situation like J2 and immediately jump to the, well, he must be an awkward bugger, mustn't he? Denying everyone like that. And in fact, the exact opposite can be true. So a good example of where we should not leap to conclusions. Okay, Ben, one more. We're nearly there. The interesting thing here is simply the number of isolates. So we may be sharing lots of knowledge, but we don't seem to be agreeing that there's an awful lot of value being added. And the value added question is a very good one for saying, yeah, it's happening, but is it adding value? Look at the two satellites and the difference between them. And the difference is absolutely stark. And where are we? Pre-production. Yeah, JT in pre-production has no agreed links on this subject whatsoever. 0. One more, Ben. And this is the same chart with the satellites removed. Sorry, I beg your pardon, with the isolates removed. And one of the things here that's interesting is when we get to the value added question, there's relatively few links between the groups. There's quite a lot within engineering. As ever, satellite number 1 isn't bad, but there's not much happening between the groups. So we've just given you some examples here from one company of some of the sort of pictures that can be emerged. I'm going to revisit that company in just a moment and show you something a little more dramatic. But before we go on, any questions or observations that anyone would like to make at this point? Right, press on then. Right, we have to ask the so what question, because we've got pictures and we have lines and circles and we have insights that something surprising is at work under the surface of the organization, but we haven't answered yet the so what question. And our take on this could I ask why we came to which particular conclusion? There's a question there, but the last little bit is missing. Sorry, That's a nice, easy question to answer, because every time we tried doing it, we got it wrong. And we find that the only people who actually can work out what's happening in these charts and determine meaning are the people involved actually talking about them and working it out for themselves. Or I'll explain how we do that in just a moment. But we have found it impossible to come up with a valid analysis of why these things appear the way they are. We've never succeeded, so we gave up years ago. Our take on the issue around networks is they enable us to solve problems. But then the question is, what sort of problems? I'm now in danger of preaching to the converted, but I'll do it anyway. So we're still with the so what question. And there are, in fact, 3 types of problems. There are tame, critical, and wicked. And the critical problems are the ones that threaten the existence of the organization if we don't get them fixed. Tame problems are those where experience is a very good guide, been there before. But wicked are the really seriously challenging ones, because they don't have simple single causes and hence no single simple solutions. In fact, complexity rules. And above all, there's never a big idea to ride to our rescue. We're never going to be in a position where someone has a eureka moment, smacks their head and says, great stuff, I've cracked it. Doesn't happen. Really doesn't happen that way. And the issue here is that the rules for solving wicked problems are very well known, but not always actually adopted. So first of all, I'm going to walk you through the basic rules, and I do apologize if I'm telling you something you know already extremely well, but they are important. Number 1, there's never a single solution. So what we need is multiple iterative partial solutions. We try stuff, we try to dent the model in various ways, but we don't expect to come up with a fantastic solution that solves everything. We don't get those solutions without high levels of connectivity and knowledge sharing. And one of the joys of working with informal networks and then showing the data to people after the event, the levels of connectivity go up and the levels of knowledge sharing go up. This is one way of achieving it. And we need positive deviance and constructive dissent. Positive deviance, those lovely people who simply don't follow the rule book, they'll go their own way. And people who will very constructively challenge the way we do things now. And they're both hugely valuable. The argument here is that wicked problems are essentially unique, they're novel, they've never occurred before, and they're not really understood until a solution has been developed and applied. In other words, we try stuff and then we go into learning, and then we start to understand the problem a little bit better than we did before. And they're one-shot, non-repeatable operations, so learning is endless. The fact that we've done something and we've achieved certain positive results means by definition that we just change the problem. And if we just change the problem, then we have to start learning all over again. And they're often symptoms of other problems. And one of the harsh realities is that so many wicked problems develop because somebody treated them as tame and applied the wrong solution. And because we apply the wrong solution, we take something and make it into a really serious, wicked problem. And there's no stopping rule. There's no point where you can ever get to saying, that's it, the problem is over, it's dealt with, it's gone, and it's gone forever. We never, ever get there. I mean, I take a silly example if you wish, but if you take knife crime as a social problem, can we ever imagine a situation where there is zero knife crime? That doesn't sound very likely to me. Okay, Ben. And there are no right or wrong solutions, just better or worse. And one of the appalling things is people seeking the perfect solution. if we do that, we'll never do anything. We just sit and tie our hands. So we have to say, this one's better than that. Give it a crack, see what happens. And lastly, that means there's no best practice. There is absolutely no chance in trying to learn from others and apply their solutions to our problem. What we can do is apply best practice for how to develop the solutions, but that's not the solutions themselves. So those are the basic rules. This is how we work. Other people work in a different way, but there you go. We start by providing very good, very insightful information describing the problem. And our view is that reports and text and tables and spreadsheets don't hack it. They simply don't. We don't react emotionally to a table of figures, whereas a spreadsheet, sorry, a graphic, we can look at it and say, that's stupid. And that's a very different kind of reaction from the analytical, looking at reports and tables and so on. And then we provide a safe environment for people to review and analyze the information. And we do loads of signal and we do loads of role modeling. We have all sorts of rules. For example, when it comes to the conversations where people analyze the information and work out meaning, nobody is allowed in the room unless they gave up their own data. We've had directors come say, well, we want to sit in on it. We want to know what people said. Say, nope, you didn't fill in the questionnaire. Close the door on the way out. You're not coming in. So these are very, very safe environments that we create for people. We either help people identify partial causes and the relationships between them. Partial causes, please note, not causes. And, sorry, Ben, press on. We agree the entry points into the mess, and people agree their own actions. And we rely on complexity to join up the dots as we go through. In other words, it doesn't matter where you enter, because if you enter somewhere, try some changes, do some learning, change our understanding of the problem, that is automatically going to move us on to a different point. So the complexity problem actually becomes a big plus. And the way we work, we always come up with problems which are beyond the authority of the people in the room to action. So there's an agreement on required actions. We work out the priorities. And part of the deal with the client is that we're going to do this. We're going to do this, and you're going to get a list of actions, and you're going to make a commitment right now to do those actions, because if you won't make that commitment, then we won't do the work. Sorry, Ben, can you go back just one? Sorry. And then we agree the follow-up. Tony, the question you raised, yes, the safe environment is absolutely critical. It's absolutely critical. We take a full day over it, and we have a number of rules which are all about making it safe for people to say what the hell they think based on the data we provide them. I would like to just show you 3 more charts relating to this same company and explain how we've changed the rules yet again. Thank you, Nicholas. We've put the word is on the front of the spec on this chart. And is a question about current reality. And here we've got a set of data where people are saying it is at least important, we've agreed, to work on compliance with protocols. And the protocols were all around employee safety and market product liability and so on. Don't worry about the details, but think about the charts we showed you earlier. And this is very thin. It's not a big, complex chart. It's a small, fairly straightforward chart. In other words, there are not high levels of agreement that people are working together to comply with these various protocols. And if we go to the next one, you'll see we've changed the word to should be. And here we're going, saying, well, you've told us what is, what do you think it should be like, which is different from that which currently exists? In other words, we give the people the opportunity to mold the future. And again, it's fairly thin. There isn't a big appetite for change. And then the last of these three charts, we've changed it to should not be. People are saying this stuff is happening and we shouldn't be doing it. So we're now giving people the opportunity to model the future, but from the point of view of stopping the stuff that was getting in our way. And you look at that chart and look at the nature of the network, and we respectfully submit that there's a huge amount of frustration on the screen. What these people are describing is stuff that they're doing that they shouldn't be doing, and it's getting in the way. And here is a very good example of three charts which provoke conversation, which is about absolute reality, and giving people the opportunity to say, well, why is this happening? Why have we got all this stuff going on? How can we stop it? But the mess there says there's no one big single solution. All we can do is get individual pairs and small groups of people working together and deciding how they should actually transact differently in the future. So at that point, I rest my case and pass back over to Ben.
Great, Dennis, thank you. Any questions? Just all I have is just a little recap. So any questions at this point? That's basically all that we're going to hit you with this evening. You'll be relieved to hear. Patrick, how much is stopping stuff that is rather than starting?
How much is stopping stuff that is rather than starting stuff that is not? So how much of it is about stopping noise rather than creating relationships?
It all depends, Patrick. There's no simple answer to that. Part of the art of working with informal networks, in our experience, is setting the thing up in the first place. And that means that we have to spend quite a lot of time in front-end discovery. So we know what's rumbling around under the surface. In other words, we were working on new product development, which was the client's problem. So how come we knew how to ask a question on compliance? And the answer was that when we did the front-end discovery, we discovered that there was a huge amount of frustration around there. We put in the question, we gave people the opportunity to say how it should be different. And then we said, well, you better talk about this, chaps, because this doesn't make sense. This is nonsense, what we're looking at. So what are you going to do about it? And you find in practice that stopping stuff and starting stuff is not that much different, because stopping, you can only stop doing stuff if you find another means of achieving whatever it is you were supposed to be achieving in the first place. But somebody asked a question about follow-up. Part of what we do when we work with groups through these, we actually collect all their decisions and we print their action plan at the end of the day. We actually print it out. We say, well, this is what you said you were going to do. Here it is. Why don't you get on with it? And then we work with a team of people from the client's organization who do the follow-up. But they do the follow-up on the basis of a published action plan that the people signed up to on the day. Hopefully that answers those two questions.
Great.
Back to Ben.
Yeah, no, great questions. I mean, it's interesting, isn't it, that all of the visual data relates to the networks, but the networks are rarely the thing that we experiment with a change to fix the problem. It's the patterns in the networks that illuminate what the problem might be, and this is a lovely example of that. So those charts, those last three that Denis has just shared, showed a huge amount of frustration with you know, the rule book that was emanating from head office around protocols. So it wasn't the network that needed to change, it was the rule book that needed to change. And it got people together working out actually how they were going to work with that in a more positive way and solve those problems for themselves. Any other questions just before I move on? I know that I think we're due to finish in a couple of minutes, so am I okay just to give a little recap, bit of a summary? Okay. So behind the facade of the org chart, what do we find? Every organization has multiple networks of informal connections, and these are the things that actually make the difference. They are the things by which knowledge and value are created. All we do is collect data about those relationships as they relate to specific topics, very, very specific queries that we ask people to respond to. So this isn't about who has phone call or email chat or Slack chat with other people. It's very, very specific to a topic, and usually to a frequency as well, and to a level of perceived importance. So we're really, really are able to hone in on something that is very, very specific. And the power of the software really is to regurgitate that data in a visually engaging way that just sparks these great conversations that Denis has been describing. This we feel really gets us under the bonnet, how the work is really working, and therefore conversations that enable better work to be done, problems to be resolved, experiments to try, and ultimately more value to be created. And as Denis has explained, you know, this approach has been used very successfully where the sort of engineering solutions, the conventional, traditional, mechanistic solutions have failed. So I think that's it from us. We've had nice sort of questions as we've gone through. Thank you all for those.